Hello, welcome back. In the last episode, I mostly ranted about the programming environment. In this episode, we're probably not going to have to worry about that. Instead, we're going to rant about the Unity environment. More specifically, I'm going to let you know about a very complicated bug or insufficiency that you're going to run into a lot. Now, these Tetris chunks are all prefabs. So if I change the prefab down here and rename it, you can see that they all change. Now the problem is that I'm going to duplicate this. These are two identical groups, right? The problem is that if I make this into a prefab, these stop being prefabs because you can't have nested prefabs. So now if I were to rename this back to Tetris chunk, you can see that all of the ones on my unprefab one change and all of these don't change. And that's a significant flaw in how Unity handles prefabs, and I doubt it'll ever change, so you have to learn to work around it. But what that means is that we have to make sure that the Tetris chunk is set up as we want it to be set up before we make our Tetramino prefabs, the Tetris shapes. So we're going to go ahead and delete that Tetris block. It's useless to us. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this Tetris block is how we want it to be. And the only thing we really need to change here at the moment is we need to create a script for it, and we need to create a material for it. First things first, let's create the script. We will call this a chunk element. And we're not going to actually do anything with the script. We're just going to make sure that it is on the Tetris chunks. And that means that when we do have it actually have function later, it'll automatically be added to all of the Tetris blocks, all of the various chunks on each block. The other thing we need to do is we need to make a material, and that's because later on we're going to want to have these colored in some way, and it would be a real pain in the butt to have to go in and create a custom material for each of them after we'd already saved it. So we're just going to create a basic material. We're going to color it so that we can tell that it's been created. We'll make it this yellow here, and then we will add it to the Tetris chunk, and it will replace the default material because the default material is very, very difficult to edit. So by replacing it with this chunk material, this Tetris chunk material that we've created, when we change this, it will change across all of the prefabs that we create, even though it has been desynced. Now, to show you what I mean by that, let's go ahead and call this L block. And let's actually create a new folder. I think it's spelled with an E. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. And we'll add it down here. And all of these have become desynced. They are no longer part of this Tetris chunk object. This Tetris chunk object is no longer linked to anything. We can delete it and it wouldn't affect anything. But if we change the color of the chunk material, you can see that it still changes. And that's because they all use this chunk material class, this chunk material object, regardless of anything else that happens. And that's the weird exception that you need to get used to. Prefabs stop working when nested, but classes and scripts don't. It's an unusual and annoying feature. Let's go ahead and create ourselves a bunch of these tetraminos. So this is the L block. Let's go ahead and duplicate it with Control D, and we can just delete the L block. Actually, we didn't need to duplicate it. We could have just renamed it. So let's go ahead and make a new one here. Let's take this block here, and if we hold Control while we drag, you can see that it moves in a large value. It's because Control is a snap to option. Control, and we can change that up here in Editor, I think. No, it is snap to snap settings. Here it is. So we can change it from 3.5. These are just settings I created a long time ago, and they are consistent no matter which project you open. So once you edit them in one project, you will always have the same settings. So I'm going to change them all back down to 1. And now, when I select this object, hold Control, and move it, it moves up 1 block. And this gets us our T, except for we actually want our T to be shaped like this. Now when you're building these blocks, make sure to keep 0 at roughly the same place, just for the sake of sanity. We can deal with that later in some respects, but it's better to have it set up ahead of time as much as possible. Rename it, drag it down, create a new block, there we go. So that, unfortunately, after I said that, I realized that I didn't do that at all. What I've done is I've created it. The center is now down in the middle. 0, 0, 0 is where is the there it is, pivot. Oh, you can see that they're all really badly offset. All right, so I have screwed that up a little bit. Let's go ahead and delete the T block that I created with position. First off, the tetramino itself should be at 0, 0, 0, but all of these Tetris chunks also need to be at the 0, 0, 0 area. We're going to delete these guys, and we will just manually, let's move this down so we can see, holding control while I move it. And so now we can manually duplicate these Tetris chunks by hitting Control D until we have 4 of them. And then we can hold down Control while we move them to create the shapes we want to create. We might as well go ahead and just start with the L block again. And now the idea is that we're always going to want this corner to be 0, 0, 0, and that's just for the sake of sanity. We can deal with it later in other slightly better ways, but this works fine. So just copy that back in. There we go. We got our L block. And as before, we're going to go ahead and create our T block next, which we can do just by grabbing these blocks and moving them. Grabbing this block and moving it. The blocks don't have any particular order, so it's okay as long as this is the lower left. And the reason for that is because of how we want to handle rotation. So how do we want to rotate this block? Do we want it to rotate around the lower left like this? Or maybe it would in fact be better to have it the way we had it before, which was this. Do we want to rotate around the middle? I think we probably want to rotate it around the middle now that I'm thinking about it. So that's fine. We actually had it right before, but you got to see me just quickly go through and recreate the prefabs, so that's always good to see. You can see how easy it is, so you don't have to feel upset. If something goes wrong, you can just blow it away and start again. It's very straightforward. So let's see, we've got a brick. Let's go ahead and move this so that we've got the square. What's the one-letter brick? I guess there isn't. Does everyone just call it a cube? Brick? I guess we'll just call it a square. I don't like having all of them with letters except for this one, but whatever. It doesn't actually make any difference. And then we've got our S block. Make sure to hit enter after you've renamed it, because if you click away it unrenames itself. So now the question is that S block actually in the right spot? Because I think we actually want to rotate it around one of the center pieces rather than, I think we want to rotate it like this, don't we? Yeah, we want to rotate it around that guy, and that'll really reduce it. So we hit apply. There you go. And now we want to have the opposite block, which is, this is actually the S block. The previous block was the Z block. And this is the S block. Now what else? We have that L that's one way. We've got we've got this L, but there's actually another L, which is the L block in the other direction, which I guess we can call the J block. And then we go ahead and drop it down here. And I think that's all the tetraminos. I don't think I've forgotten any. If I did, I'm sure that someone will tell me. We could have gotten a lot of this functionality by randomly flipping them across the x-axis. So we don't actually need a J block and an L block. We don't actually need a S block and a Z block. We can just use one or the other and then flip them randomly. But I don't plan to do any flipping, so this is a faster way to handle it in terms of not wasting any, not having any kind of complicated nonsense happening in the background. In the next episode, I will make it so that they drop continuously.